All right, Game 5 of the NBA Finals. Pacers, Thunder, tied 2-2. We're heading back to Oklahoma City. You can really feel the pressure mounting now, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. It's got that must-win feel, even if it's not technically elimination time just yet. It feels huge.
It really does. And for this deep dive, we've got a whole pile of stats, some model outputs, market info, and, those real-world factors.
Exactly. We're going to try and unpack what all this analysis says about this absolutely pivotal Game 5.
Yeah, the goal isn't just who wins,
I see.
right? It's more about why the numbers point one way, how that stacks up against the betting lines, and maybe the most interesting part.
What the models don't catch.
Exactly. Those real-world things that could completely flip the script.
Right. So think of this as like your quick guide to the analytical angle on this game. We'll pull out the key bits, maybe some surprising details from the analysis we've reviewed.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Start with the basics, the foundation, regular season numbers. Just looking at wins and losses, I mean, there's a pretty big gap here, isn't there? Pacers 50-32, solid, but the Thunder 68-14.
Yeah, that 18-win difference, it says a lot straight away. And you mentioned OKC Game 5 is there. They were 35-6 at home, just dominant.
35-6, wow.
Yeah.
Compared to the Pacers, who are basically .500 on the road,
Yeah.
right? 2020.
Exactly. That home road split is pretty stark, even before we get into the, deeper stats.
Okay, so baseline record, especially at home, heavily favors the Thunder. But, records don't always tell the whole story. What about the efficiency stuff, the advanced stats?
Yeah, and that's where something like net rating really comes in handy,
Explain that again quickly. It's like points scored versus points allowed, but adjusted.
Per 100 possessions, yeah. It basically levels the playing field if one team plays super fast and the other slow. It shows you who's more effective possession by possession.
Gotcha. So it measures how much better one team is overall, offense and defense combined.
Exactly. And the numbers here, they're pretty stark. The Pacers had a net rating of plus 2.2 for the season.
Okay, solid playoff team number.
Yeah, good playoff team stuff. But the Thunder, they were way up at plus 12.8.
Wow. So that's like a plus 10-point difference for 100 possessions.
Plus 10.6, yeah. Huge gap. It's kind of the difference between, like you said, a solid playoff team and a truly elite championship-level team based on the season.
And you see that breakdown in their offense and defense ratings too, I assume.
You do. Pacers, great offense, 117.4 offensive rating, really high. But the defense, 115.1 defensive rating, gave up a lot. Thunder, elite on both sides, 120.3 on offense, which is amazing, and a stifling 107.6 on defense. The defense was like top 2 or 3 in the league.
Okay, so the season data, pretty much however you slice it, points to OKC being the significantly stronger team. Now let's look at the market. Where does Vegas, or the betting market, start things off for Game 5? The source mentioned Bet365 odds.
Right. The money line was Pacers plus 325, Thunder netted 425. Pretty wide.
Yeah, and the spread.
Thunder favored by 9.5 points. So OKC 9.5, Pacers plus 9.5. Both sides around that standard negative 110 price.
And the total? The over-under.
Sitting between 223 and 224 points. Again, standard negative 110 juice. So these lines kind of represent the market's best guess, their consensus expectation.
Okay. Any important injury news? We should touch on that.
Yeah, the big one is Miles Turner for the Pacers. He came back in Game 4, played about 23 minutes. The report said no major issues.
That's huge for Indiana.
Absolutely. And right now, all the main starters for both teams are listed as probable. So relatively healthy, fingers crossed.
Good news there. And schedule, travel, anything notable?
Pretty standard stuff. Pacers rested Saturday, traveled Sunday, games Monday in OKC. The time difference is only an hour, so the analysis pegged the impact as minimal. Maybe half a point swing either way. Max, not a big deal.
Okay, so we've got the basic picture. Season stats heavily favor OKC. Market agrees with the big spread. Players seem mostly healthy. Now, let's get into the model. How does this specific analytical model process all this?
So this particular model, its first step is calculating what it calls an expected margin, or EM.
Okay.
And it starts with that big net rating difference we talked about, the plus 10.6 points favoring the Thunder over the full season.
Right, that efficiency gap.
Exactly. Then it adds a bit for home court advantage in the playoffs. The source used an estimate of about plus 3.0 points for that based on historical data.
Makes sense. Home court matters, especially in the finals.
For sure. So you take the plus 10.6 net rating edge, add the plus 3.0 home court bump, and the model's expected margin for Game 5 lands at plus 13.6 points for the Thunder.
13.6. So the model thinks, on average, OKC should win this game by almost 14 points. That's significant. How does it get from that margin to like actual win probability?
It uses standard statistics. It assumes that, okay, the average might be plus 13.6, but any single game can vary wildly.
Right. Randomness, shooting luck.
Exactly. So it uses a standard deviation. Think of it as a measure of that expected randomness or spread. The model uses 12 points for this standard deviation, which is pretty common in basketball analytics and lines up with how the market seems to operate.
So a 12-point standard deviation means most games would probably fall somewhere between like Thunder by 1.6 and Thunder by 25.6, roughly 2/3 of the time.
That's the idea, yeah. It quantifies the likely range, so using that plus 13.6 expected margin and the 12-point standard deviation, the model spits out probabilities. It calculates the Thunder win the game outright about 87.4% of the time.
87.4%. Wow. Okay. And the Pacers, obviously, the rest.
Yep, leaves the Pacers at about 12.6%.
So a very strong lean towards the Thunder from the model. Now, let's do the comparison. Model versus market. Where's the daylight between them?
Okay, this is where it gets interesting for you, the listener. Let's look at the money line first. Those odds we mentioned, plus 325 for IND, an average of 425 for OKC. You have to adjust for the vig, right? The bookies cut.
Right. Got to take out their commission to see the true implied odds.
Exactly. The source estimated the vig around 4.4% here. After you remove that, the market odds imply the Thunder have about a 77.5% chance of winning.
Okay, wait. The model says 87.4%, but the market implies 77.5%.
Correct. That's a difference of almost 10 percentage points.
So the model thinks the market is really undervaluing the Thunder's chances to win?
Significantly, yes. According to this model's calculations, betting the Thunder money line even at negative 425 shows positive expected value, or plus EV.
Okay, plus EV. Break that down. It means if you made that bet 1,000,000 times.
You'd expect to come out ahead on average in the long run, yeah. The model put the EV for the Thunder money line at plus 8%. So for every dollar you bet, you'd expect to get back 1 negative 8 cent over many, many trials, theoretically.
Got it. A perceived edge. Now, the spread, Thunder 9.5, they got to win by 10 or more.
Right. And since both sides, plus 9.5 and a negative 9.5, are priced at negative 110, the market is basically saying this is a 50-50 proposition, a coin flip whether OKC wins by 10 plus or not.
Makes sense. What does the model think about them covering negative 9.5?
Well, remember that expected margin was plus 13.6, and the standard deviation was 12. Based on that, the model calculates the Thunder cover, the 9 at 9.5 spread, about 63.4% of the time.
63.4%. Compared to the market's 50%, that's a pretty big edge again.
It is a very strong signal from the model that the Thunder are likely to win by double digits. And the EV reflects that the analysis pegged the Thunder 9.5 bet at plus 23% EV.
Wow, plus 23%. So from the model's view, that's an even stronger potential value bet than the money line.
Much stronger, yeah. Higher potential return per dollar wagered over the long haul, according to this specific analysis.
Okay, so money line and spread model says Thunder, Thunder, Thunder. More strongly than the market. What about the total? Over under 223, 224.
For the total, the model looks at both teams' offensive and defensive ratings to figure out an expected points per 100 possessions for this specific matchup.
Okay.
Then it multiplies that by an assumed pace for the game, how many possessions they'll actually play. The source used an estimate of 101 possessions.
Pretty fast pace.
Yeah, both these teams like to run. So doing that math, the model calculates an expected total score of around 232.5 points.
232.5. But the market line is only 223, 224. That's like a 9-point difference in expectation.
Almost 10 points, exactly. It's a big gap. So the model then takes that 232.5 expected total, and using a similar standard deviation concept for totals, the source used about 15 points for total variance.
Right, because scores can swing a bit more wildly, maybe.
Perhaps. It calculates the probability of the score going over 224 points at about 71.5%.
71.5%. The over, when the market implies 50%.
Yep. Another massive discrepancy. The model sees a huge edge on the over here.
What's driving that? Why does the model think the score will be so much higher than the market expects?
It really comes down to those core team characteristics. Like we said, both teams play fast top 10 pace. Both have really good offenses. The model's basically saying the market hasn't fully priced in just how many points these two efficient, fast-paced teams are likely to put up against each other, especially with 101 possessions.
Okay, so the pure quantitative analysis, this model, it paints a super clear picture. Thunder win big, likely cover minus 9.5, and the game goes over 224.
That's the story the numbers tell, yes.
But, and there's always a but in sports, right?
Always. This is where we have to talk about the stuff outside the spreadsheet, the external factors, the risks, the nuances. the model just can't capture perfectly.
The human element, the game day stuff, what are the big ones flagged in the material?
Well, Miles Turner's conditioning is definitely number one. He looked okay, maybe listed as probable. But coming off that ankle injury, limited minutes in game 4, is he truly 100%?
Right.
The analysis suggests maybe not. And if he's limited, that could potentially dock the Pacers maybe 2 or 3 points from their expected performance.
Then defensively, if he's hampered.
That could actually push the total over, weirdly enough. If Indiana's rim protection isn't quite there, maybe OKC scores easier. It's a tricky factor.
His health is definitely key for the Pacers. What else?
The Thunder's rotation. There's talk, based on interviews mentioned in the source, that OKC might go with a really tight 8-man rotation for Game 5.
Keep their stars on the floor longer.
Exactly. SGA, Chet playing maybe 40-plus minutes. Now, that could help them cover the spread early, having their best guys out there, but could fatigue become a factor late? If guys are playing huge minutes, maybe efficiency drops in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
That could potentially lean things slightly towards the under if scoring slows down late. Something to watch, but it depends on the official rotation news.
Interesting trade-off. More stars versus potential fatigue. We already touched on travel being minimal impact. What about the refs? That was a fascinating detail.
Yeah, it's one of those under-the-radar things. The specific referee crew assigned can matter. The source highlighted one crew chief, Bill Kennedy, if his crew gets the assignment. Historically, or at least this year, his crew has shown a measurable home team bias in calls, worth about plus 1.8 points to the home team on average, according to the stats cited.
Wow. So if Kennedy's crew is on the floor, that's another little nudge towards the Thunder covering the spread.
Potentially, yeah. It's subtle, but these things can add up. Of course, that's pending the official league announcement of the crew.
Crazy detail. Anything else impacting scoring or the total?
Yeah, the style of play. Fast breaks and free throws. Both these teams love to attack the rim. They draw a lot of fouls, high free throw rates. That style naturally pushes the pace, and importantly, it can really juice the scoring late in games with clock stoppages and free throws. That favors the over.
Okay. And shooting, the great equalizer, or heartbreaker, 3-point variance.
Always huge in the playoffs. The Pacers, their three-point shooting has actually dipped in the playoffs down to about 34%. And specifically, guys like Hield and Nesmith have really struggled on the road, shooting like 31% combined away from home.
Ouch.
Yeah. If they have another cold shooting night from deep, it makes it incredibly hard for the Pacers to keep up offensively and cover that plus 9.5 spread. Big swing factor there.
What about momentum? The series is 2-2, but how have the teams been playing lately overall?
Well, the Thunder have been really hot down the stretch. A source mentioned they were 14-6 straight up in their last 20 games, and their net rating over that span was a stellar plus 10.2.
So recent form definitely favors OKC, too.
It seems to align with the overall season data and the model's outlook, yeah. Adds a bit more confidence to that Thunder Moneyline angle.
And lastly, just the environment, that OKC crowd.
Yeah, the Paycom Center gets LOD. The source even cited an average decibel level like 118 dB in the playoffs. That kind of noise can genuinely disrupt communication for the road team, maybe force timeouts, mess with offensive sets. Another small edge for the home team.
Okay, so pulling this all together, the data, the model, the market comparison, and now all these external factors. What's the bottom line? Where did the analysis land in terms of specific actionable insights with that positive expected value?
Right. So based on comparing the model's probabilities to the market's implied probabilities, after removing the VIG, the analysis prioritized 3 main potential value bets, kind of in this order.
Number 1, the highest EV.
The over 224 points, that had the biggest gap between the model, 71.5% probability, and the market, 50%, leading to an estimated plus 36% EV.
36%. That's huge. Driven by the pace and offense, right?
Exactly. The model just sees that market total as being way too low given how these teams play.
Okay, what's number 2 on the priority list?
Oklahoma City, 9.5 points against the spread. That came in with the next highest positive EV, around plus 23%.
Also very strong. Based on that big expected margin the model calculated.
Yep. The plus 13.6 expected margin leads the model to believe OKC covers that spread over 63% of the time, way more than the market's 50-50 view.
So the model's confident in a double-digit Thunder win. And the third one?
The Thunder Moneyline still showed positive EV, but lower at plus 8%.
So still an edge according to the model, but maybe not as compelling relative to the odds compared to the over or the spread.
Exactly. Less value per dollar risked from the model's perspective compared to the other two.
And player props. Anything there?
The analysis basically said, look, player props move so fast based on news, matchups, rotations, they really need real-time checking right before the game. Hard to make a call days or even hours out.
Makes sense. Okay, so this deep dive gives you, the listener, a really clear framework. The quantitative stuff heavily favors OKC winning big and the game going over. But how do you actually use this, knowing all those wild cards we talked about?
Yeah, that's the critical part. You absolutely have to remember the model has limits. It's
Yeah.
based on season averages, a standard home court adjustment. It doesn't know specific coaching tactics for Game 5 or how exactly a specific ref might call fouls in the paint tonight or...
Or if Buddy Hield suddenly gets red hot from 3.
Exactly. That pure shooting look. The source even mentioned it can swing a final score by like 8 points just on its own. That's massive variance.
Yeah, an 8-point swing from just making or missing shots is huge.
For sure. And those market lines we talked about, they can move. The analysis suggested the spread might shift 1.5 points, the total maybe 2 points, just based on final news about Turner or who the refs are, or even just pregame warm-up reports.
So things are still fluid. What's the practical advice then, from the source material, for navigating this? For you, the listener.
Well, first, recognize the finals are peak volatility. So maybe consider betting less than you normally would. The source suggested maybe less than half your usual stake.
Okay, manage risk because things are unpredictable.
Right. And related to that, have clear exit points in mind, like a stop loss if a bet goes against you quickly or a point where you take profit. Discipline.
Smart. Don't chase. Don't get greedy.
And probably the most crucial piece of advice, keep monitoring the news right up until game time. What's the final word on Turner's health? Who are the referees? Any last-minute lineup tweaks? The recommendation was even to consider phased entry. Maybe don't put your full bet down all at once. Maybe place a part of it if you like the early line, but keep some powder dry to react to new information closer to tip-off. Be adaptable.
That makes a lot of sense. The model gives you a strong starting point, identifies where the numbers suggest value, but you got to layer on that real-time reality check.
So yeah, to wrap it all up, this deep dive into the data and this specific model, it points pretty strongly towards an Oklahoma City win, probably by double digits, and a high-scoring game going over 224. Significant plus EV identified in those spots based on the current market.
The story isn't finished there. As we dug into all those other factors, Turner's actual ankle strength tonight, OKC's rotation fatigue, which whistles blow who's hitting shots, they can absolutely change the game and challenge those nice, clean predictions.
Which kind of leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. We've seen how a purely data-driven approach can highlight potential edges, right? Pretty clearly in this case. But we've also seen just how many unpredictable, human, almost chaotic elements are swirling around. So the question is, how much weight do you give the stats versus the story? The model versus the messy reality? What does wrestling with that tension tell you? Not just about betting on sports, but maybe about analyzing any complex situation where patterns meet randomness.
Definitely something to think about as we all watch Game 5.